So I've been playing Zenless Zone Zero for about a week and a half now. I'm currently level 36 and I've completed the main story. So I think I'm at the point where I want to do a review, give my thoughts on the game and if it's worth playing. Now, a couple of things I want to mention. I'm not at endgame yet as I am free to play and I don't plan to spend any money in the game. I will also mention that I have played Honkai Impact, Genshin, Star Rail, PGR and Wuthering Waves. So I'll be making some comparisons between Zenless Zone Zero versus the other Hoyo titles and the current competition. Now, with my last review on Wuthering Waves, I gave the different aspects of the game their own rating, and then I rated the game as a whole at the end. For Zenless, I'm not going to do that, and instead I'm going to talk about all the things I think are positive about the game, then all the things I'm neutral on, then all the negatives, and finally I'll give a review score at the end, and if I would recommend it or not. But that's enough of the intro, so let's get started with the positives. The art style and animations are really well done. The comic or manga style storytelling for me is the biggest downside as it feels a bit cheaper than what Star Rail and Genshin offer. If Hoyo had made an actual physical or online manga as a merch product, I would have thought that was really cool, but to be fair, I might just not be into it since I'm not the target audience when it comes to having a manga or comic style story in a 3D action game. If I was going to watch an anime, I wouldn't watch one that was told in the style of a comic book. Also, the normal generic conversations that you'll see a lot of going through the main story are also kinda shit in my opinion, especially when one character is supposedly striking another character, but neither of the characters do anything even similar to acting it out.
Yes. Oh, that hurts!
Consider that from Nekomata.
However, I did put this in the positive section because the animated cutscenes are really well done. I love the way the characters move around during cutscenes as it feels very cartoony, which I really like, and Hoyo seems to try and convey a character's personality not only through the way that they talk, but the way that they move. In my opinion, the fully animated cutscenes are easily the most attractive part of the story. If that's the reason for more generic looking scenes, then it's fine. Let's continue talking about animations, but in combat now. This game's combat is very fast-paced in general, so you don't tend to notice if a character has an animation that doesn't make sense, since the animation typically plays very fast and ends pretty quickly. From what I've seen and the characters that I've played, all of the animations are really smooth and all make sense for what the character is doing. If you compare this to Wuthering Waves, the normal combat speed is very similar with you not noticing animations that don't make sense, but there are instances where the game will slow down time, like at the end of beating a hologram, and some characters have attack combo animations that don't make any sense at all and get pointed out by the time slow. I think Zenless saves itself from exposing the player to this while still having a time slow at the end of missions, since the game doesn't allow an enemy to die halfway through an attack. This is both good if you want to hide immersion breaking animations from being noticed, but bad for any timed missions where the difference between you meeting the time quota and failing it could be the enemy didn't die when its health reached 0 since the attack of your character wasn't finished animating. Now, if you got confused by what I just said or don't understand what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. It's a very small issue, which for the vast majority of people will probably never even occur or isn't an issue. Next, I want to talk about music in the game. From the second my first mission started and the mission intro music kicked in, I started doing that thing that people do when they don't know how to dance, so they just start bobbing their head to the side, and I found myself doing that a lot when I would hear a new track for the first time. The music in this game is really good and I like it a lot. I think I talked about this in my Wuthering Waves 1.0 review, since I'm pretty sure I mentioned that music doesn't need to just be there to have something in the background. Music can enhance an experience by taking it to that next level, which I think Hoyoverse really understands. There's been really good music in Honkai Impact, Genshin, Star Rail, and now Zenless is following suit as well. As far as I'm concerned, Hoyo is killing it when it comes to music in their games. Now, I'm not saying this is a negative for the competition since it doesn't make a game worse not to have it, but catchy and impactful soundtracks are definitely a positive when you do have them and enhance the experience. Next, let's talk about the characters. The characters in this game have the most unique and creative designs we've seen from Hoyoverse, and I know there's people out there saying that the game is made for furries. I get it, I guarantee you the community is going to have furries in it, but I imagine most people aren't attracted to Ellen because of the shark tail. I think Ellen looks hot, but you could remove the shark tail and her design would look just as hot. But the characters in this game aren't limited to their base model. Every character has their own unique animations for almost every part of the game. In the menu screens, in combat, when idling, when running. This game is so immersive. The animations and designs really help to make each character feel like they're completely unique with little to no shared features or assets with other characters. And if that wasn't enough, as I mentioned earlier, each character's design, movement, and personality plays a massive role in helping the player not only like the characters that they are playing, but also a lot of the NPCs we interact with around the world of Zenless. Even some of the normal NPCs that you find around the world have really good designs. So you can really tell that Hoyo has put a lot of effort into their models. One last point on characters that some people might care about is characters in Zenless cannot equip a different weapon. The full character model comes complete in terms of their looks and design. So if you're someone who cares about a character needing to have their weapon like Genshin and Wuthering Waves to look complete, you don't have to worry about needing to gacha for their weapon in this game. Characters will already come with a weapon that, at least for now, doesn't change at all. So the only reason to gacha for their weapon, or this game it's called a W engine, is to complete the character kit-wise. So if you care about a character's fashion, it's not going to cost you extra money or premium currency to make the character look right. Now, the W engine still does give a change to the character's look, but for all the characters I've seen with their signature W engine, it's only a glow effect that certain actions get rather than a drastic change to their look. The only character that I've played with their own weapon is Anby, and the change is so subtle that you can hardly notice it, especially in combat. So if you care about a character not having to equip something that looks like it doesn't belong, it's not going to cost you extra money or premium currency to make the character look right. So after talking about a lot of the major positives, I'm going to just quickly talk about the lesser ones before we move into the neutral category. The daily grind in Zenless so far feels pretty good. If you just want a game where you jump on, do your dailies and then jump off, it's great. The bosses and elite enemies are okay, offering a little bit of a challenge, but not really enough to have to concentrate too hard. However, the designs of some of the enemies in the game are very cool. When tracking missions in the open world, you can teleport close to your mission objective very quickly using the map. The map has some pretty useful information on it despite seeming basic, showing you what characters are currently in the area, how many quests are in the location, and hints to complete objectives. The arcade in the game is a great addition and a lot of fun. I didn't spend as much time playing the two games that are currently available, but I did enjoy both of them, and I think the arcade is a really cool idea for adding future minigames and events. That's all for the positives, so let's move on to some more neutral parts, starting with the main story and character story quests. I was going to put this in the positives thanks in most part to the ending of the main story, but since not all the main story is voiced, which feels like a massive downgrade coming from Hoyo's other titles, also the story gets pretty slow in a lot of areas, which bored me so much that I had to take multiple breaks from playing. But despite that, the story is still good, thanks in most part to the animation quality and the voice acting. It is told in typical Hoyo fashion with long drawn out chat sessions of essentially talking about nothing, but there's also really cool parts in the story that are pretty engaging. The positives of this game's story is it does have a skip button, but the unvoiced parts in the main story are told like this, and these are the ones that you can't skip and have to click through instead. I'm happy they added a skip button, but they added it in the wrong place. Another point though that is a massive positive in my opinion is the main story missions and the character story missions can be replayed through the video archive. If you just want to go through the story quickly to progress, you can power through the story for now, skipping all of the dialogue, and come back later when you have more free time and watch the story then without having to go to YouTube to get the story that way, while some streamer or YouTuber yaps over the top of it. Another positive about the story is the game allows you to bring trial characters, which if you don't have all of the characters in your roster, this is a great opportunity to try out the characters that you don't have if you don't want to spend or you can't get lucky. These trial characters are genuinely the reason that I want Colada and Lycon. However, a problem with the story currently is there's too many roadblocks in terms of needing to be a certain account level to progress the story. Right now, it feels too restrictive, like it's just trying to slow down how fast players can experience the story. Next, this might surprise some people. The TV system is going to be in neutral since it doesn't bother me too much. I do think that it's the worst way Hoyo's come up with to navigate through one of their games, but it's not inherently bad. It's just not as enjoyable as some of their other titles. So some positives for the TV system would be it could create some complex puzzles for players, but there is a ceiling for how complex they can be. Also, there are some minigames made with the TV system, like the Space Invader-esque minigame. That was kind of fun, but at the same time, most of those minigames would have been better off being made for the arcade that's already in the game. Some negatives for the system would be the amount of the player's time it wastes having to do tedious shit, loading between fights, or telling a story, especially the ones that aren't voiced. The level of zoom doesn't zoom out far enough for me, with transitions between areas resetting the level of zoom that you have set it to. Moving on, let's talk about missions themselves. Some of the missions in game are really good, and I gravitate more towards the combat missions and some of the puzzle missions. But the bosses and mobs don't feel like enough of a challenge. For the bosses and mob stages that players need to farm for character ascension materials, they don't need to be hard, their current difficulty is fine. But weekly bosses and more endgame focused content feels more like I'm beating up a boxing dummy than I am fighting something challenging. This isn't really a negative though, since some players might just want to have a more casual experience that they don't need to try hard on, but also want to feel like they kind of are beating something challenging. This game does a great job of not actually putting you up against something super difficult, but giving you the illusion of difficulty through the way the enemies move and the combat system's complexity. Speaking of complexity, let's talk about character combat complexity. Now, in all honesty, this should also be in positive, but I'm putting it in neutral for a couple of reasons, which I will mention. Some characters have what people call their hidden tech. I'm just going to call it the character's combos. There are many different ways to attack your target in Zenless, with some characters allowing more in-depth combos than others. Now, I like the idea of characters having unique combos that people who have invested time into learning can perform for either style points or slightly more damage. The problem is, there isn't really anything cool or difficult to fight against and use these sweet moves on. So why would the average player bother learning them? The devs for Star Rail are doing it right in terms of boss design. Some of the bosses in Star Rail are just as cool as the characters players want to gacha for. I don't know if I'm alone in this opinion, but if I have a really cool character with some sick combos to learn, I want to be able to fight something that will feel cool to fight. I don't want to fight a punching bag. Having a punching bag at the beginning of the game, like Great Jagras from Monster Hunter, is fine. The game shouldn't wall you right off the rip. But having another punching bag just with more health at endgame is not what I'm looking for. Right now, the enemies and how hard they hit feel like a light, casual level of difficulty where most of the difficulty comes from their health. This game might get some fun fights in future, and I hope it does, but right now, it doesn't offer a lot. Other than character combos, let's talk about the other combat systems. The combat feels not brain dead, but like it doesn't require a lot of thinking. You see a red flash, dodge or swap to perform a perfect dodge. You see a yellow flash, dodge or swap to perform a perfect assist. Now, it might sound it from my explanation, but I wouldn't say that the combat feels boring. It's more unrewarding for skill investment. If you're fighting multiple enemies, it feels more annoying than it does difficult, but to be fair, that's not unique to Zenless. Most other games in the space feel the exact same way. But when you're fighting a single enemy, it doesn't really feel any more difficult. It just feels like a bigger model with more health and different moves that flash the same red and yellow indicators. If I could make a suggestion for the end endgame versions of the bosses, take away the red indicator for attacks and give a different tell for the yellow indicator, like the body part flashes yellow instead. Having the red and yellow indicators in the same spot makes all of the bosses 10 times easier than they could be. If the attacking limb or weapon was the thing that actually flashed yellow, you would still need to keep an eye on the whole boss. Now, maybe this is a bad idea, but I got the idea off Morning Aches from Wuthering Waves. I don't remember what difficulty it starts doing it, but it will stop showing you the normal parry indicator for certain attacks and will instead have circles around its hands that pulse before it does a ground grab attack, and the flying grab will make its wings do a big yellow flash right before the swooping grab attack, which both tells indicate to the player it's time to parry. I don't think you'd need to change the moves or increase the health of a lot of bosses in Zenless if the boss's endgame version didn't help the player as much as it does early game. Last thing on combat is perfect assist parrying being tied to switching characters limits what a solo character can offer in a fight versus what a team can offer. You might end up with a single character for a few different reasons. The mission might only allow you to have one character for whatever reason, your other two characters might have died, and the last one is a bit more niche, but you might be someone who wants to solo a boss, like me. So taking away the ability to parry some attacks because you're unable to do the swap required to perform a perfect assist is pretty disappointing for someone like me. However, I imagine when we're at endgame, perfect assist will feel way better when you have 2 or 3 characters that you actually want to switch to. Right now, I don't really have that, and I have a hyper carry Ellen, so I'm not really wanting to swap right now. Next, team building and team function in combat is pretty good, but ultimately ends up in neutral for a few reasons. Before we talk about the problems though, let's talk about how to build a team. The player's team contains up to 3 playable characters and a Bang Boo. The Bang Boo is like a support that will be on field following and fighting alongside your characters. The characters that can fill up the 3 team slots can be 5 different elements or attributes and 5 different roles or specialties. The 5 attributes are Ice, which can build up freeze on enemies, with frozen enemies taking extra damage from crits and shattering at the end of the freeze duration. Fire, which will inflict burn on enemies and make them take damage over time. Electric is similar and will inflict shock on enemies, making them take damage over time. Ether is again similar and will inflict corruption on enemies, making them take damage over time. And last is physical and will build up Assault, which is a single large amount of damage, and Flinch, which makes the enemy's daze build much faster for a period of time. The 5 specialties characters can be are Attack, which is a unit that just deals more damage. Anomaly units are good at building up their attributes debuff, so electric anomaly characters will build up shock faster than an electric attack character would. Stun characters build up the daze meter faster. Supports revolve around buffing your teammates. And last is defense, which are basically tanks, with the only defense character in the game currently being Ben. One thing I will say, don't sleep on stun characters. They do a really good job building up daze super fast. The inputs that the player has access to are a basic attack, a dash, a skill, an ultimate, and a swap assist. Some characters like Ellen have a charge attack, and I think all characters have a dash attack. When you have 2 or more characters alive in the team, if a yellow flash appears on an enemy, you can swap to the next character, and if they are a melee character, you will perform a block which will parry the attack and allow for a follow-up attack afterwards. If they are a ranged character, they won't parry and will instead dash backwards, gaining some distance while performing a swap attack. When it comes to building your team, you are free to mix and match characters how you please, but like we talked about earlier, you won't have access to swap counters if only one member is alive in your team. Also, all characters have a passive ability that only becomes active when they're paired in a team with a unit of the same attribute or from the same faction. Faction being like the Cunning Hares group from the story that contains Nicole, Ambi, Billy, and Nekomata. Also, some of the Bang Boos have abilities that will be unavailable unless your team contains at least 2 members of a specific faction. Now, I don't mind these restrictions, but I don't really like them either, since some of the characters feel like they need to be paired with at least one of the two requirements to get access to their full potential. One other thing that I'll mention is Collider is currently my most wanted character other than Lycon, since when Collider and Ben are in a team together, they have a unique interaction where Collider's basic attack and ultimate are both different, having Ben join in to assist her, doing more damage. I'm pretty sure this is the only interaction like this in the game so far, but it makes me look forward to seeing if in the future they release more characters that interact with each other in combat like this. It's a really cool idea and reminds me a lot of Ether Gazer, and I would love to see more of it. Next, let's talk about the gacha system. It's mostly exactly what you'd expect from a Hoyo game. It has a 90 pity on the limited character banner with a 50% chance for it to be the limited unit, and if you lose the 50-50, your next S rank is guaranteed to be the limited unit. The W engine, or this game's weapon banner, is an 80 pity with a 75% chance for it to be the limited W engine, and if you lose the 75-25, the next S rank is guaranteed to be the limited W engine. The standard banner is a 90 pity, which contains both standard characters and W engines. And lastly, the game has a Bang Boo banner where you're able to select a target Bang Boo. It has an 80 pity and it is 100% guaranteed when getting an S rank to be the targeted Bang Boo. The base probabilities for the limited character banner and the standard banner is 0.6% for an S rank. The W engine and Bang Boo banners probabilities are 1%. All pities across the different types of banners are calculated separately from each other, and the limited character and W engine banner pities will carry over to the next limited character and W engine banners respectively. New players also get the opportunity to, I believe, get either an S rank character or W engine guaranteed after the first 50 pulls on the standard banner. There is no unique starter banner in this game. Also, just like Star Rail, after 300 pulls on the standard banner, you get to select any standard 5-star character from the standard banner to get for free. One thing that's different from Genshin and Star Rail is they actually tell you without you having to go and find out from the records yourself how many pulls until the next guaranteed A rank and S rank respectively. The reason this is in neutral is for a gacha game, it's not super bad like some other gachas, with the game giving you an okay amount of premium currency for free, at least so far. The game has a pity system that carries over between banners. Some other gachas don't do that, and it has a way to eventually guarantee one of the standard 5-star characters if there is one in particular that you really like, but your luck is shit. However, the S rank rates are still really low. The limited W engine banner isn't 100% guaranteed, and compared to some other gachas out there, the amount of premium currency that you're able to farm is not as lucrative. So Zenless is very middle of the road, being worse than PGR and Wuthering Waves, being about the same as Star Rail, but also being better than Genshin. Now, this next point I'm going to bring up is really only relevant to Zenless, and it's more of a personal gripe. But why can't I switch the character that I'm playing as around town between Belle and Wise? Both siblings are present through the story, both work the same job as managers of the video store, and they're both the minds behind the infamous proxy Phaethon. Now, for your choice in the story, sure, lock the player's choice for which sibling actually controls EOS. But running around town collecting commissions, talking with characters, going to find collectibles, there's not a lot of reason why I shouldn't be able to switch to the other sibling. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not playing as Wise or Belle. I'm playing as Phaethon, which contains Wise and Belle. They're both my characters. Now, this is not a, oh shit, I can't switch, this game sucks, I'm quitting. But this is the first Hoyoverse game where it would have made sense to be able to play as either of the two, unless they plan to either kill off the other sibling or make them turn on you at some point. Last thing I'll talk about in the neutral category before we move on to the negatives is switching between mouse and keyboard and controller controls. This is neither in the positive or negative since it's not a bad system, but I don't understand not making the control switch depend on if the player inputs any key for mouse and keyboard or any button press for a controller. In order to switch without having to go to the settings, you have to click the start button to switch to controller, or you have to press the escape key to switch to mouse and keyboard. I don't know why they added this extra step just to switch controls, since Star Rail didn't need this and Wuthering Waves also doesn't need it. However, if they want to keep the system the way it is, please just make it so that if you're in a menu, you can still switch controls with the same buttons, since right now, if you're in a menu, you're locked to your current control layout, even if you hit the escape key or the start button. And the reason that's a problem is that's the time that I want to switch from controller to mouse and keyboard, is when I'm going to do a lot of navigating menus and clicking. So let's get started talking about the negatives. The beginner experience, which would be the first couple of hours of Zenless, was really boring. The experience started out okay, but then it started to fall off and didn't do a great job getting me immersed into the world. I will always watch the animated cutscenes and listen to the dialogue that feels important to the story, but a lot of it is dialogue that didn't feel important enough or was talking about a puzzle or a hard enemy close by, and even though these are small events, the characters would still talk about it for way longer than they should. Not only that, when I got exposed to some of the progression systems, it was presented in such a way that I got a bit lost and confused about what I was supposed to be doing, even though I've played lots of gachas over the years, like the titles I mentioned at the beginning of the video, but also games like Epic 7, Monster Super League, and Summoner's War, to name a few older titles. This wasn't my first rodeo, but this was the first time in a long time that I felt like I didn't know what I was looking at or what I should be farming. The beginner experience should be a lot less boring and sell players on the game a bit better, as I found myself taking multiple breaks from the game in the first few hours, but also not really having the desire to come back to the game after the break. I've already made this reference in another video, but I'll make it again. As someone who's played over 5,000 hours in Warframe, this game reminds me of how players would try to tell the average gamer that Warframe was a good game by making arguments like, oh yeah, no, the beginning's bad, but trust me, the game gets good after the first 100 hours. This argument will never work on the average gamer. The average person is going to try the game with what free time they have and make a decision sometimes within the first 15 minutes. The vast majority of people out there are not going to play your game for 100 hours just to find out if it's good. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is I do like Tectone, but in my opinion, he was wrong for calling out people who made up their mind about the game after playing it for the first few hours. Not everyone is like us. I will continue to play it. He will continue to play it, but the average player won't. Now, you could argue that there is a different standard for content creators, and I might agree with that, but for regular people, the beginner experience for a free-to-play game is so incredibly important for trying to sell the idea of playing the game long-term and getting players invested through either time and or money. In the first few hours of a free-to-play game, it's so easy to drop since players have little to no time or money investment. Next, let's talk about the servers and connectivity for the game. I've had a lot of issues since launch of the game failing to connect to the server, but there's nothing wrong with my connection, and sometimes restarting my game is the only way to fix it. Recently I've been playing Star Rail, no issues. Wuthering Waves, no issues. PGR, no issues. But Zenless, almost every time I played it, I'd get some connection issue and get booted back to the login screen, sometimes within the first 5 minutes. I guarantee you this will be an issue that gets fixed at some point, but at the moment it still exists and it's really annoying. Next, I want to talk about how the game has forced switching with 2 examples. Now, the lesser of the 2 examples I have are swap assists, which don't force you, but incentivize you to switch in a way that can be intrusive to your playstyle. However, the bigger example is chain attacks against stunned enemies. The game will slow down time and give you 2 options to choose to switch to another character and perform a chain attack. The reason I'm putting this as a negative is it doesn't give you the option not to switch for the chain attack. Now, this is probably going to be an issue for early game when you have very few strong characters, and less of a problem at endgame when your DPS and support characters are all built. Now, you can wait out the chain attack, but because you can't cancel it manually, it doesn't feel good to do so, making it feel like the game is forcing you to switch. Next, I want to talk about the camera. The automatic targeting, even without lock-on, is crazy intrusive to the player, at least on controller, when you're trying to keep an eye on multiple enemies. The camera doesn't seem to have any delay between moving the camera to look around and resetting to center the camera on the current target enemy once you stop moving the camera, making it a constant battle where the camera is flicking side to side while you try to keep an eye on the enemies behind you. I think this could be fixed if the camera would prioritize keeping as many enemies that it can in view in the direction that you're looking after adjusting the camera to look around. This would allow the player to look around until they see what they want, and then the camera would try to keep those enemies that were in the view on screen. With how fast some enemies can attack from off screen, the most irritating part of combat is fighting multiple enemies, and I don't want to have to battle the camera at the same time. Another quick thing on the camera, when you're playing as Wise or Belle, the camera is right up close to your character with, from what I've found, no way to actually zoom out far enough. It doesn't help that the camera is aimed at the center of the character rather than being a little bit higher so that you can see over the top of your character's model. This is really only a problem in the video store, but you spend so much time in there that it does get annoying. So now that we're done with some of the major negatives, let's quickly go over the minor negatives. A couple of the tutorials were pretty tedious to navigate, and the text not only being in the top right corner of the screen, but also being pretty small didn't feel great when I was trying to learn what I was doing, why I was doing it, where the tutorial was navigating me to, and what buttons would get me there. Now I imagine for mouse and keyboard this was a non-issue since you can just click on whatever was highlighted, but it didn't feel great on controller. The interact and sprint buttons on controller are the same when exploring the city, making it hard to avoid interacting with something when you are trying to run around. There were some audio issues with Nicole at one point in the story.
We entered the hollow. Is this how you treat your regular customers?
Which honestly I didn't expect from a Hoyoverse game, but since Hoyo seems to care a lot about their stories, I almost guarantee you that this was either a bug or it's been fixed by now. But that is everything that I wanted to bring up about the game. I would like to see a few things changed, like being able to parry without another teammate if your other characters die or you run a mission solo. I think that the combat in this game is at its peak when you're fighting bosses, so a pure boss rush mode that rewards you at the end based on the average health percentage that you have across your 3 characters, since there's no actual healers in the game that I'm aware of, and it should stay that way. Health percentage at the end of a mission would be a great way to gauge how well you did. I would also want to see full button layout customization with no restrictions so that we don't have one button doing 2 conflicting actions. And lastly, I don't know if I want to see the TV system changed or just optimized to run and load faster. Since if the TV system didn't feel as intrusive to my playtime as it currently does, I think it's fine. If they fix, change, or add these things, I would probably give Zenless Zone Zero an 8 out of 10. But as it stands now, I'm going to generously give the entire game as a whole a 6 out of 10. However, if you only care about gacha or characters in the game, it's more like an 8 or a 9. That's mostly thanks to the characters being more unique than anything else in the 3D anime gacha space. And because of that, this game doesn't really have any competition right now. So if that's what you're looking for, give Zenless a go. However, I don't know if Zenless is going to be a game that I continue to play long term. I'll see how it goes since I do love the character designs, but the best indicator for if I want to play a game is even when I'm not playing it, I'm thinking about it. But unfortunately right now, 1.0 just doesn't offer enough to keep me interested. So that's my thoughts and review on Zenless Zone Zero. Unfortunately, it wasn't great in my opinion, but for those who are enjoying the game, or it sounds like a game that you might enjoy, don't let someone else's negative opinion sway yours. I'll give you an example of when I've followed this logic. The vast majority of people used to, or still do, make fun of Ark Survival Evolved for multiple reasons, but mostly because it runs like shit, which it absolutely does. But when I was a kid, I really loved dinosaurs, so being able to tame and ride around on dinos was enough for me to enjoy the experience. When I was playing it, I didn't care what other people said. What mattered was I was having fun. So if Zenless is your kind of game, have a great time. Who cares what other people think? However, at minimum, I hope you're at least able to enjoy the video, and I do hope I was able to give an unbiased review, even though I referenced a lot of my own preferences. Unfortunately, this video has taken me a lot longer to get out than I would have liked since I didn't have a lot of free time, but I also didn't want to half-ass it. I may not be enjoying Zenless that much, but I didn't want to be unfair to the game because it has very good bones. So if you did enjoy the video, you can let me know by hitting that like button or by leaving a comment. And if you would like to see more content in future, you can subscribe to the channel. I don't know if Zenless will be something that I make more content on, but I'm currently playing and making content for Wuthering Waves, which I'm really enjoying, especially making the bloopers that are at the end of some of my solo challenge videos. Given Kuro's track record with PGR, which I also play, I just don't make any content on it as I play on my phone, and also how Kuro seems to be handling Wuthering Waves, it's a game that I'm very likely to continue playing far into the future. So I want to thank you all for watching, and until next time, I'll catch yous later.